The story kicks off as the Abyss threatens to destroy Noel's hometown. The Abyss is no ordinary forest. It forms when too much mana floods the air, creating a link between the human world and the demon realm, known as the Void. As the Abyss deepens, stronger and more dangerous creatures crawl out of it, and tonight it's hit a depth of 12, enough to summon a deadly monster called a Lord. Noel's grandfather Brandon, once the strongest seeker and known as the legendary Overdeath, is gearing up for battle. As the looming threat draws near, he grips his old weapon, muttering to himself, surprised that he's fighting again after all these years. He orders Noel to stay in the shelter, claiming that help will arrive soon. But Noel knows better that help isn't coming. Brandon is preparing to take on the Lord alone, and Noel realizes his grandfather plans to handle it himself. With his usual legendary confidence, Brandon warns Noel not to doubt him. He asks if Noel's forgotten who he is. Overdeath, a name feared by all. He swears to protect Noel with his life, and as he heads out, Noel calls after him. Then as Brandon steels himself for the fight, his thoughts briefly turn to Noel. He wants to tell him one last thing: men can never let anyone look down on them, no matter what they face. Meanwhile, Noel stays hidden in the shelter, his mind racing, terror tightening around his chest as dread creeps in. Eventually, unable to stay put any longer, he steps out and finds Brandon gravely wounded. Brandon reflects on his fate, accepting that even Overdeath has his limits. He tells Noel that this is the way of seekers. Choosing a life of battle means living with death constantly at your side. Despite his critical injuries, Brandon asks Noel if he still wants to become a seeker, knowing the risks that come with it. Holding back his emotions, Noel responds with determination, telling his grandfather he'll follow the same path. Brandon, though proud, insists that being a seeker isn't enough. Noel must become the strongest. He asks Noel to promise that he will surpass even him. With a heavy heart, Noel swears he'll become the greatest seeker. Brandon chuckles softly, proud of his grandson. He tells Noel that he loves him, and in that final moment, Brandon passes away, leaving Noel to scream in agony. It's been 2 years since that fateful night, and Noel has kept his word to become a seeker. His team is now locked in battle with a swarm of monsters, and Noel, ever sharp, barks out orders on how to secure a win. Despite being part of the weakest support class called Talkers, Noel wears that title with pride. Then after taking down the monsters, the team gets to work dissecting them. Noel explains that while lesser vampires can't use magic, their queen can spawn hordes rapidly, each one strong enough to rip an ox to shreds. As they plan their next move, a vampire lunges at Noel, but Tanya swoops in just in time to save him. The group discusses going straight for the queen to stop the endless spawns, but Noel advises against it. He reminds them that as a C-ranked team, they should focus on thinning out the spawns first, giving them a better shot at victory. His teammates know just how crucial Noel is because his buffs make all the difference in their success, giving him the authority to call the shots. Even though they're ranked lower, they're handling this B-rank mission, all thanks to Noel's guidance and skills. Noel takes a moment to reflect on his role. As a talker, his job is to support his team by buffing them to enhance their combat abilities. But his own strength in battle is nothing to brag about. He's entirely dependent on his comrades to fight while he boosts their power from the sidelines. It's why talkers are often laughed at, dismissed as the weakest class. Suddenly, the vampire queen strikes from the shadows, releasing a deadly poison gas that spreads in an instant, throwing the team into chaos. Lloyd and Walter immediately realize they need to save Noel first. They know without his buffs, they're doomed. Tanya then rushes to help, but amidst the confusion she's hit by the queen. And now with Noel incapacitated, Lloyd and Walter are struggling to fight back. They're painfully aware that without his support, they can't win this fight. The team, desperate and on the verge of panic, begs Noel to give them orders, reminding him that he's the talker. Anger flares up in Noel as he snaps back, telling them not to look down on him. In one swift move, he pulls out his weapon, ready to show them just what a talker can do. He activates his tactician skill, boosting the entire party's abilities by 25% just by giving command. Noel then calls out to his brain-dead teammates, telling them to dodge an incoming attack. He then uses his battle voice, instantly increasing the recovery rate of their stamina and mana. Noel orders Tanya to cast a barrier around the two warriors, prepping them to obliterate the beast. But things quickly spiral when more monsters show up. As Tanya starts to panic, Noel uses his peer support skill to calm her down, stabilizing her frantic mind. With a cool head, he sets a timer for 74 seconds and declares he'll handle the small fry while the others focus on the main body. Noel keeps barking out orders, guiding every single move with surgical precision, telling them to prepare their strongest attack. After stunning all the small fry, Noel whips out his magic gun, the only anti-beast weapon a talker like him can rely on. He fires an ice bullet, freezing the demons in place, but one breaks free. Now Noel's down to his last bullet, with only 43 seconds left on the clock. He coolly calculates that the remaining beast will reach him in 23 seconds, giving him just enough time to instruct the team to hit the main body. He gets the command out just in time, right before the beast lunges at him, and his teammates finally unleash their attack, landing the final blow. Tanya, shocked they managed to pull it off, is horrified when she thinks Noel got hit. But Noel, ever the tactician, had it all planned out. His timing was flawless. He dodged the attack just enough while factoring in that the spawns would lose their power once the queen was defeated. The battle ends exactly as he predicted, with the mission wrapped up in 74 seconds flat. Impressed but laughing, his teammates tease him for cutting it way too close with his risky timing. Noel's mind drifts to a memory of his grandfather. As a child, Noel had been frustrated about being a talker, wishing he could be a warrior like his grandfather. But his grandfather, ever reassuring, promised him that his talent would eventually shine through, and that he would help Noel become the strongest seeker, no matter his class. Back in the present, Noel silently reaffirms his goal to surpass his legendary grandfather, even as a talker, the role so many consider the weakest. He begins explaining how Atri, the capital of the Velment Empire, thrives on the synergy of magic and technology, both derived from research on the beasts they fight. The city depends on seekers to protect it from the abyss, and for that, they are revered as heroes. Later, during a meal with his team, Noel reflects on how, at just 15 years old, he began searching for companions in Atri, knowing that as a talker, he couldn't fight alone. Walter, beaming with pride over their 5 million Phil reward, talks about their steady progress. While Tanya and Lloyd discuss setting their sights even higher, Noel, meanwhile, quietly considers that their team could really use a scout. But for now, he's focused on gaining more experience with his current squad. The conversation takes a turn when a slightly tipsy Walter asks Noel if he's upset about the reward. Teasing him, Walter suggests that Noel cares too much about money, saying that a seeker should have a big heart and not get caught up in greed. Walter's words stir another memory in Noel. His grandfather once gave him some tough but essential advice. He told Noel that seekers must prioritize money, not out of greed, but to buy the best equipment and supplies needed to survive. Being called greedy or evil wasn't an insult, but rather a mark of success. His grandfather, who was known as Overdeath, had drilled into Noel one crucial lesson: never let others look down on you, no matter what they say. Jumping back to the present, Noel claims he's not bothered, but Walter keeps badgering him. This ignites a heated back and forth, with Noel jabbing at Walter for always using his age as a badge of authority. After all, for a seeker, skill is what counts. So Noel mocks Walter for leaning on his age to push others around. Walter then enragedly fires back, accusing Noel of hanging back in fights while others face danger. He reminds him that he puts his own neck on the line to shield the team, but Noel just keeps needling him. Things escalate as Walter threatens to end Noel's life, and Noel, cool as ever, dares him to try. Just then, Lloyd jumps in to break it up, reminding them they're all on the same side. He suggests they split their reward and call it a night, managing to cool things down. Once the mission's over, the team's left with only 250,000 each after paying the clan. Tanya's less than thrilled with the payout, thinking it's peanuts for the work they put in. Lloyd tries to soothe her, saying tough missions like this don't come around often, and they'll rake in more on the next one. But Noel chimes in, pointing out that unlike the official clans, they don't get missions straight from the country, which cuts into their chances and cash flow. He reminds them that independent seekers like them don't get these opportunities often, and it's way harder without clan backing. Lloyd then gives the team an update on their total savings, which adds up to just over 12.8 million. Without a second thought, Noel jumps in and proposes using the cash to form their own clan. But Lloyd, ever the cautious one, warns Noel that starting a clan means coughing up 20 million to the country, way more than what they've got. But Noel, full of confidence, says he's ready to drop the remaining 7.2 million from his own stash. His determination is almost maddening. He's convinced that starting a clan will finally get them out of doing these low-tier, hand-me-down jobs and let them grow for real. Even with Lloyd harping on about the crazy costs of renting a base in the capital. But Noel says he's already got a lead on a cheap spot. Lloyd isn't done yet though. He's got serious doubts about whether they can handle running a clan, pointing out that they're just a young, inexperienced C-rank team. He's sure they're not ready for that kind of responsibility. But Noel's not having it. He throws the question right back at Lloyd, asking him when exactly he thinks they'll ever be ready. If they don't make a move now, they'll be stuck as C-rank seekers for life. Noel argues that the only way they'll ever gain the experience they need is by actually running the clan, not by sitting around and waiting for the right time. Lloyd's still worried, saying that without the country's trust, they'll never land the big money jobs they need to make it. Noel fires back, explaining that their youth, their looks, and their strength are exactly what the country wants. The government's hungry for more seekers, and the successful ones aren't just mercenaries, they're idols and heroes. Noel's not done, and he points out that their skills and image can help them rake in sponsorship deals from companies, giving them extra cash and resources. Walter's still shocked by the conversation, can't wrap his head around the idea that being good-looking could actually score them better treatment from the country. But Noel stays confident. He even teases Walter, saying that despite his flaws, even he has the kind of looks that could boost the clan's image. Walter, initially skeptical, slowly comes around to Noel's point. Tired of scraping by with second-hand jobs, he agrees with the plan to form a clan, admitting that status, fame, and money sound pretty tempting. He even cracks a crude joke about using his new status to attract women, which earns him a sharp scolding from Tanya. With Walter now on board, Noel turns to Lloyd, waiting for his opinion as their leader. Then Noel drops a bombshell if they don't agree to form the clan. He's ready to quit the party and take his share of the savings. The room falls silent as Noel reminds them all of his dream to become the greatest seeker, even surpassing his legendary grandfather, the Overdeath. Lloyd, caught off guard by Noel's resolve, realizes this isn't something Noel will back down from. After a moment of reflection, he agrees, acknowledging that they'd have to face this decision sooner or later anyway. Tanya, still in disbelief, questions Lloyd's decision, but he calmly reassures her that this was always the path they were headed down. Lloyd suggests they hold off on more talk until they've rested and recovered from the long day and the alcohol. The group agrees to meet again in 2 days to finalize their plan. As everyone heads out, Tanya pauses, seemingly wanting to say something to Noel, but all she ends up saying is a quiet goodbye. The next day, Walter rushes to Noel in a panic, claiming that Lloyd and Tanya have betrayed them, leaving them rattled and unsure of what to do next. After reading the letter, Noel quickly pieces it together. Turns out, Lloyd sank all his money into bad investments a couple of years ago, and now he's drowning in debt. So to dig himself out of that hole, he embezzled the party's funds and skipped town before anyone could catch on. Noel finds the whole thing ridiculously amusing because Lloyd, the guy who always acted so noble and chivalrous, pulled off the slimiest move possible. But enough laughing. Noel cuts to the chase and asks Walter when and where he found the letter. Walter explains he caught wind of a great job last night, so he headed to Lloyd's room first thing in the morning to share the news. But by the time he got there, Lloyd had already cleared out. That's when the innkeeper handed over the letter. According to the innkeeper, Lloyd and Tanya left the inn around 8 p.m. the previous night, just before the city gates closed. Under normal circumstances, neither Noel nor Walter would have known about this until later in the day, meaning Lloyd was trying to buy as much time as possible before anyone noticed he was gone. It's 9:30 am now, so even though they found out earlier than Lloyd probably anticipated, it's been over half a day. Lloyd and Tanya must have put some serious distance between them and the capital by now. Still, the city gates should have records showing which way they went, and since they most likely left on foot, Noel and Walter could catch up if they grab horses. Walter's raring to go, but Noel reminds him that this isn't just a simple chase to get their money back. Those two chose to abandon the party, and that's outright betrayal. So worst case scenario, if they catch up and confront them, it could end in a fight to the death. And even if they manage to beat Lloyd and Tanya, the money's already gone. But Noel's not about to let them get away without paying for what they did, and they'll suffer one way or another. After getting dressed, Noel drags Walter down to the local tavern. Walter, confused as ever, doesn't understand why they're even here. But Noel knows it's pointless to explain anything to Walter because he likely wouldn't get it anyway, so he just tells him to follow his lead. As they step inside, Noel immediately grabs the attention of the entire tavern. He then announces that 2 members of his party have stolen their money and fled the capital, offering a reward of 2 million fils to anyone who can bring them back alive. Walter starts panicking, questioning why Noel would announce their situation so publicly. But Noel, calm as ever, explains that there's a particular person he's trying to flush out, so announcing it to the whole tavern is just a time saver. The first group to accept the mission is the Lightning Bite Party, so Noel gives their leader all the details he has on Lloyd and Tanya's escape. Soon enough, several other parties jump on the offer as well, but Noel still hasn't found the person he's looking for. Then a shady-looking man approaches Noel about the job, and immediately, Noel can tell this guy has some useful information, the exact type of person he was waiting for. They step outside to talk, and the man explains he saw a couple leaving town yesterday who perfectly matched the descriptions of Lloyd and Tanya. He claims to know exactly where they're headed, but the problem is that his party isn't strong enough to take them down alone. Sensing an opportunity, Noel offers him 1 million fils in exchange for his help, half the reward. The man tries to argue for the full 2 million, but Noel's already read him like an open book. He knows the guy is too broke to walk away from 1 million fils, So the man eventually gives in and agrees to the deal. With everything settled, Noel tells the man to get his party ready and meet him at the south gate. He also instructs Walter to wait for him there, as Noel has something he needs to take care of first. A little while later, Noel finishes his preparations and heads to the front gate to meet everyone. Walter clearly unsettled, so he pulls him aside to ask something that's been bothering him. He wants to know if Noel's really okay with fighting Lloyd and Tanya, but Noel, without hesitation, says he has no problem killing them, no mercy, no second thoughts. Walter can't believe how cold Noel is after everything they've been through together as partners. But Noel reveals that from the very day they met, he had already devised contingency plans to take them down if they ever crossed him. In fact, he even has a plan for Walter. Noel never truly trusted any of them, and he tells Walter that being less trusting might do him some good in the future. Later that day in a remote village, Lloyd and Tanya are walking and Lloyd assures her they should be safe for now, so he's confident they can rest easy tonight. In his mind, there's no way Noel would be petty enough to chase them down, especially since the money's already gone. But Lloyd seriously underestimates just how petty Noel can be, and out of nowhere Noel appears behind them, flanked by a full squad of bounty hunters ready to capture them. Lloyd panically reaches for his sword, but before he can move, Noel uses his ability to freeze him and Tanya in place. Both are left standing there stunned and completely unable to move, and with Lloyd trapped and nowhere left to run, Walter steps forward furiously yelling at Lloyd for betraying them. He's ready to punch Lloyd right in the face, but Noel stops him because there's something he wants to ask first. Noel knows Lloyd already spent all the party's savings, but he figures the money from the vampire hunt should still be around, but Lloyd panically denies it, claiming he's used that money as well. So Noel unimpressedly asks if Lloyd blew it on another one of his failed investments, but Lloyd sweatingly admits that he used the money to pay off more of his debts. The way Lloyd stammers and shifts under pressure gives Noel all the confirmation he needs. It's crystal clear now, Lloyd isn't just a bad investor, he's a full-blown gambling addict. He's likely gambled so much that he's buried under debt collectors, but still, Noel wants to hear it straight from Lloyd's mouth. Then, before Lloyd can launch into another apology, Walter snaps, yelling at him for squandering all the money they worked so hard to save. Lloyd, dropping the innocent act, yells back, claiming he's the real victim here. He didn't want to touch the party's funds, but gambling was too fun to resist. And besides, it's their fault for dumping all the responsibility of leadership on him. That's it for Noel, he's had enough of Lloyd's pathetic excuses. So without hesitation, Noel kicks Lloyd square in the face, sending him to the ground, and starts stomping on him repeatedly. The audacity of Lloyd trying to shift the blame infuriates him, because Lloyd was the one who begged to be leader. Also, he could funnel money into his gambling addiction. Before long, Lloyd is beaten bloody, pleading for forgiveness, but Noel doesn't even acknowledge the concept. He's more than willing to stomp Lloyd 1,000 times if that's what it takes to feel satisfied. At this point, Tanya desperately speaks up and begs Noel to spare Lloyd. Noel pauses, but only to offer a twisted deal. He'll spare Lloyd if Tanya is willing to take the beating in his place. Noel, ever the equal opportunity punisher, says he has no problem stomping her into the dirt if that's what she really wants. Then, using his power, he compels her to confess her involvement. Under the influence of Noel's ability, Tanya is forced to tell the unfiltered truth. She admits that she gambled the party's money right alongside Lloyd, and shockingly, she's even more of an addict than he is. She even starts blaming Lloyd for losing so often, saying that if she had gambled more, they wouldn't be in this mess because she's better than him at it. Noel's ability forces the target to reveal the absolute truth, no matter how ugly, for a brief period. Then, when Tanya snaps back to her senses, she's furious and accuses Noel of using mind control on her, yelling that it's against imperial law. Noel unfazedly agrees with her. It is illegal to use mind control for personal reasons, but he coldly reminds her that she is the criminal here. And what he's doing isn't mind control for personal gain, it's interrogation, and perfectly legal in this situation. Now that Noel is done dealing with the traitors, the man who helped him capture Lloyd and Tanya demands his payment. Noel agrees but tells him to wait a minute, but the man is clearly not the patient type. So he grabs Noel and accuses him of trying to scam them out of their money. But Noel calmly drags the man to the ground and assures him he'll get paid for his work, so he'd be wise to shut up and wait. But the man is still pissed off and draws a knife, and he is about to attack Noel. But that's the worst mistake he could have made, because Noel, not one to tolerate threats, immediately knocks the man unconscious with a well-placed punch to the chest. Noel had learned this technique from his grandfather the hard way by being on the receiving end of it. It's a precise strike to the area just above the heart, temporarily paralyzing the heart muscles and causing even experienced fighters to faint if done correctly. Noel's grandfather made sure he mastered it because as a talker, Noel doesn't have the ability to buff himself, so this move gives him at least one solid offensive tool. Then as the man's teammates drag his unconscious body out of the way, a fancy carriage rolls up, just in time. The man who steps out is none other than Finocchio Barzini, an infamous slave trader with a flair for the dramatic, and surprisingly a friend of Noel's. He's the leader of the Barzini family, and while quite eccentric and flamboyant, he's one of the few people Noel knows who can get the job done. Noel greets him warmly. After all, Finocchio is the key to his plan, and if it wasn't obvious by now, Noel fully intends to sell Lloyd and Tanya into slavery to recoup the money they stole from him. Tanya horrifiedly protests, but Noel quickly reminds her of the alternative. He could easily turn her over to the police. And in this city, jail time means being sent to the mines, a fate far worse than slavery. The mines are brutal, and with a survival rate of just 2% after 10 years of hard labor, Tanya's odds of making it out alive are practically non-existent. Becoming a slave, on the other hand, offers a much better chance of survival, and maybe, just maybe, they'll get lucky and end up with a kind master. With that out of the way, Noel asks Finocchio to evaluate Lloyd and Tanya for sale. After a quick assessment, Finocchio offers $6 million. Noel unimpressedly says that's not nearly enough, but Finocchio apologizes, explaining it's a bad time, he can't offer more. The Holy Cross Church is about to impose a decree that everyone must take a vow of poverty, and if Finocchio offered top dollar for Lloyd and Tanya, it would draw too much attention, and that's something he'd rather avoid. Noel, surprised by the church's influence over a family as powerful as the Barzinis, shrugs it off and says that he will take the $11 million. It takes Finocchio a second to process the counteroffer, but when he does, he erupts, accusing Noel of trying to swindle him out of an extra $5 million. Annoyed by the constant yelling, Noel casually bumps the price up again and again, until eventually he's asking for $15 million, well above Finocchio's original $6 million offer. Finocchio, visibly frustrated, is on the verge of losing it, but Noel leans in with a clever deal. If Finocchio buys the two for $15 million, Noel promises to tell everyone that Finocchio paid $30 million instead. The church's decree only restricts overpriced purchases, but if Finocchio spreads the word that Lloyd and Tanya are worth every penny, people will flock to buy them simply because of their inflated value. So if he played right, Finocchio could easily resell them for as high as $90 million. Impressed by Noel's cunning, Finocchio even offers him a leadership role in his family, but Noel unsurprisingly turns it down, so Finocchio understands and agrees to the deal. But before sealing it, he makes his way over to the scruffy guy and his party, issuing a cold warning. If they breathe a word of this, they'll face painful deaths. With that said, Finocchio hands Noel a down payment for the two slaves and begins taking Lloyd and Tanya away. Tanya then desperately pleads with Noel not to go through with this, but once again she's met with the cold reality that forgiveness isn't in his vocabulary. She panically turns to Walter, knowing full well that he has a crush on her, so she expects him to step in and save her, but Walter, despite the plea, refuses. Tanya then furiously unleashes a barrage of insults, ripping into him with every nasty word she can think of. And believe me, it's a lot and very nasty. And that shit makes the look on Walter's face priceless, because he never imagined the girl he liked could be so vicious. With the deal finalized, Noel hands over the promised 1 million fills to the shady man, then turns to leave with Walter. But just as he walks away, the man calls out, branding Noel as the devil. But Noel, far from insulted, wears the title with pride. In fact, he considers it a badge of honor and vows to use it to his advantage in his quest to become the strongest in the world. After all this shit, Walter's left standing there, questioning his life choices, seriously considering quitting the whole seeker job. But Noel then tells Walter it wasn't his fault. In this job, you're gonna meet a lot of people, and most of them are gonna stab you in the back. Walter might not be the brightest, maybe even a little dumb, but Noel knows he's got a gift for fighting. He wants Walter to stick around, keep fighting by his side, and help rebuild their party. But Walter just can't, because after what happened, he can't see himself living the seeker life anymore. So Noel understands and respects his choice. Then, as Walter leaves the city, Noel wishes him good luck and says goodbye. But as for Noel, he will never give up. Sure, his party's dissolved and it stings, but that won't stop him from becoming the strongest. Then as he walks, he spots some snake scales and thinks snakes shed their old skin to grow tougher. So that's exactly what he's going to do. It's time to shed the past, rebuild the blue beyond from the ground up, and make it stronger than ever before. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to not miss the next part.